What happened was there were already incursions of fire ants in Brisbane, and they wondered whether we'd be able to train a dog to find fire ants, and it had never been done as far as we could establish anywhere in the world. And the big thing was there's over 100 different species of ants in greater Brisbane area. So not only did we have to get a dog to find ants, we had to be able to teach that dog to discriminate against all other ants and only find the fire ants. The first thing that we had to do was decide which type of methodology we would use, whether we would use food, which some training programs use for sniffer dogs, or play-driven dogs. To have them be motivated by play, I feel, is a much better way, and that's the strongest way to get really nice working dogs that overcome all of the things that we need them to overcome in an environment. They love the game, and it's just, they get to play all day long. What we did was we imprinted the dog by taking the pheromones from the ants and giving those to the dog to be able to sniff, and then making the play happen at that time. They basically think, when I find this odour, I find my toy and I get to play with my handler. Once the dogs actually accept that, we call it olfactory imprinting. They've actually got the scent in their head. They don't need to be presented scent. They know what it is that they're looking for. As soon as we had that done, we then did what we call a transition to take them from the lab-produced odours to the same odours that wild colonies would produce. And that takes a little bit of tweaking to get done. So then we have to get them out to all different colonies so that they start hitting that wider picture of fire ant and all of the other environmental factors that come into that wide picture. And then testing them in the field and giving the opportunity to get around where there were ants and they could prove that they could find ants.
I think these dogs are by far one of the most effective tools that we've currently got to date operationally. The land that they cover and the ability they have to be able to detect whether it be 6 ants here or a colony of ants over here with thousands in it, the dogs don't discriminate. And for us, that's extremely important because we want to make sure that we've got an area clear and make sure that it's fire ant free. With the environmental areas that these dogs can work in, whether it be longer grass, whether it be in someone's backyard, or broad-scale acreage around cattle and livestock and everything else, the dogs work extremely well. They cover their areas quite rapidly, and they have the ability to detect odour from anywhere from 10 to 30 metres out.
Fire ants have a nest, which is a nucleus. Then they might have foraging holes or satellites. So it's like tentacles going out everywhere. So it's a much more precise area for the dogs to find, whereas with electric ants or little fire ants, they don't have an actual nest or a colony as such. It's not like a spot on the ground. It's always constantly moving, and they're more like a carpet.
So in Cairns, our dogs are trained to be not only searching those broad open areas, but we tend to get them to target areas a lot more in depth around garden beds. We'll actually get them to do a lot more air scenting, lift their head up to check up in higher areas because the ants will actually traverse up trees. So what happens is the dogs come into where the ants are and they get overwhelmed with it very easily because there's so many ants spread out in such a big area instead of a trail to follow or a particular nest to go to. We have to have a totally different way of training the last parts of it so that we target the dogs to go to the areas where they're most likely to find the ants. So the handler has to be very, very good at reading that animal's changes to then give themselves an area to target.
Before I started actually working with the dogs, I was going out with the handlers and watching them work. And it wasn't until I actually went out in the field and didn't have any idea that we were going to find ants, and then going through and actually watching the dog I was handling go ahead and indicate on a fire ant nest that I would not normally ever see because it was underground. It's a pretty good feeling, and it sort of lets you sit back and realise how amazing the dogs actually are to be able to pick up a nest in a area that's 5 hectares. It was a pretty big thrill for me. Because they're detecting stuff that visually you can't see. So that's what makes them a benefit. All year round operational surveillance tool that is giving us almost 100% confidence that when they clear an area, it is in fact clear. You've got one handler operating 2 to 3 dogs, which gives us the opportunity to be able to rest an animal to ensure that we don't burn a dog completely out at the end of each search. We have an operational requirement for our dogs, each dog to be able to cover and survey around about 2 hectares
per dog. So we can have anywhere from 2 to 3 operational dogs in any dog team, which means that on any given day we can cover anywhere from 4 to 6 hectares.
For a person to search a large area, it would take a lot of time and effort, and there's a lot of chance that they could miss things at certain times throughout the year, whereas the dog can do it all year round exactly the same. They don't need to see nests, they do it through odour. They've got about approximately 1 million times better nose than a human. We imprint them to the particular odour that we want them to find, whether it's fire ants or little fire ants, the electric ant. Some of the biggest challenges were, how do we do this without putting our dogs at risk, because fire ants sting people and sting dogs. We needed to make sure that we were looking after the welfare of the dogs, that if they did ever get stung, that they weren't going to be one of those dogs within the population that would suffer from anaphylaxis. We also needed to make sure that the dogs knew that odour and didn't start switching over to other ant odours. And we needed to know that the way that we were imprinting them was clean without human contamination. Also picking the right people that have the aptitude of a really good understanding of animal behaviour to be able to read dogs and to work with the dogs and to get the best out of them. We've changed the imprinting so that the dog gets presented with scent several different ways so that it's got a very, very good scent picture. That makes our transition later so much faster and so much more precise. And also a big thing is the animal ethics. You know, we've always been very strong on animal ethics and welfare. I think we were the first dog program in the country to do animal ethics, and we've continued that all the way through.
I dare say I've learnt more in the 2 weeks I've been working when I first started with the dogs and virtually my whole prior working time with the zoo industry.
And what they can do for this program and the sensitivity that they provide as a working tool is hands down money efficient and not only unique but also exciting for what the future holds for dogs operationally in a variety of different programs.